But joining us here on the show first and foremost is NFL insider and columnist for CBS Sports, CBS Sports Network, the NFL on CBS. And that is our friend Jason Canfora. JLC, good morning.
What's going on, DA? It's been too long, my friend.
I know. Same here, man. Everything is good. I wish you and the fam a happy holidays.
Same to you, brother. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. And something really caught my eye over the weekend. You wrote that the Panthers' job, if it were open and Ron Rivera was no longer there, would be the most interesting job, the most appetizing, appealing job on the market of the NFL this offseason. What makes it so?
To a number of coaches, absolutely. I can't say. There's no, you know what I mean? Like, I can't say there's no universal, these guys aren't taking a straw poll on it and then announcing the results. But I've talked to enough of the individuals in particular who will be among the best and brightest candidates, and you talk to enough agents who represent a lot of coaches, and you start picking their brains about, where would the closest thing to a dream scenario be? And it's Carolina for a lot of guys, for a lot of reasons. Many of them football, but not just football. But when you look at the totality of the existing roster, the ability to win quickly, the way teams within the division are trending, and look, the Saints are obviously great this year, but I mean, this Drew Brees has got a year or two left tops, Atlanta's going to pay Matt Ryan $45 million cash in the 2019 calendar year to be the 13th best quarterback on the planet, and Tampa is going to rebuild again. So it's a great place to live. You've got an owner who just spent $2.5 billion cash for the team and didn't make a dent in his finances, who's bright, motivated, competitive, will give you all the resources you want, and you'll be the first guy he ever hires, and he's going to really want that to succeed. And the infrastructure will be there. I think Marty Herney's done a very good job with the roster, and, keeping Marty Herney would not be the worst thing in the world either. They've had a history of success, and it's just, I think, for a lot of guys, a great place to raise their family. It's not a huge media market. It's not you're not under, if you don't win right away, it's not like Green Bay. You don't have the media sort of stuff and all the ancillary BS you have to deal with if you're coaching the Jets. When you start to compare it, and then everybody says Cleveland, 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 just tell me what Jimmy Haslam's touched that hasn't turned to stone. Like, you're asking a lot of guys to suspend disbelief. No coach has won more than 10 games there. And I get that the roster's better, since Haslam took over. And it's obviously a better roster and everything else. But at the end of the day, you're answering to D and Jimmy Haslam. And I think that scares the bejesus out of some of these guys.
That's all really, really interesting. And so you bring up that Green Bay point. You have Aaron Rodgers there, but is that not necessarily a desirable job because of what you mentioned?
I think it is, but I think there's guys. I mean, I talked to somebody at length last night who will definitely be involved in multiple head coaching interviews. And I asked my read on the situation, with vis-a-vis Green Bay versus sort of Carolina versus Baltimore, versus Cleveland, because I think those are generally considered probably the four best opportunities. And this guy was aligned with me. He's like, the way they restructured the front office, like they claim they don't have an owner, but it's pretty clear that Mark Murphy's pounding his chest right now, and he is the owner. And, we talked about the history of their hiring there. I mean, I wrote a column the other day about this. You can go back to Vince Lombardi walking in that building in 1958. From that beginning of Lombardi football in Green Bay till the present, they have only hired a head coach with former NFL head coaching experience 2 times. One was Forrest Gregg, who they knew intimately, who was a Hall of Fame lineman for them, obviously, coached their offensive line, coached their offense, and then went to Cleveland and Cincinnati, and they hired him as a head coach in Green Bay. And the only other time was Ray Rhodes 1 year in 99. That's not their culture. That's not what they want to do. I don't know that they bring in a Harbaugh or a Rivera or somebody like that and say, okay, we're going to listen to how you do it and do it that way. I think they're looking for somebody younger with maybe more malleable who they can kind of program and plug and play the way they looked at, McCarthy 13 years ago. He didn't come in there with rings on his finger, and guns a-blazing, making $10 million a year. He eventually got to $8 or $9 million a year. It took 13 years. Same thing with Holmgren. I mean, just go back. Mike Sherman. So I don't know, guys. I don't know that that's a match for one of these sort of alpha types or, guys who've done it before and had success before, or even just guys who've been in the NFL for a super long time and have their sets of ideas and this is how we do things. I don't know that meshes with the Packers culture. That's why I wrote extensively about, Pat Fitzgerald at Northwestern. And I'd be stunned if he's not at the top of their list. I don't know if they can get him. I don't even know if they'll try to get him. But as they're doing their due diligence there, that's the kind of guy who I would think they might go after. 44 years old, hasn't been in the NFL before, but everybody knows he could if he ever wanted to. Could they woo a guy like that out of Evanston? I don't know. They should try.
That's fascinating. Jason La Canfora joins us here on CBS Sports Radio and the DA Show. You bring up John Harbaugh. Look, I mean, as you and I have talked about and as you reported, there appears to be a breaking point coming at the end of the season. But what happens if they make the playoffs? What happens if –
Nothing. I mean, I'll go back to what I wrote at the bye week. Everything I reported then is still the case. They were on a road to where John Harbaugh was being looked at as other teams as far and away the best guy out there, the best potential head coach out there. And there are teams who are going to come in guns a-blazing at $50 million for 5. Like, I think that's going to end up being – sort of the opening point to start to get in the Harbaugh mix. And he's not doing another bogus one-year extension. Like, I reported that as firmly as I could possibly report it back then. And a guy like him, with 100 wins and 10-5 in the playoffs and a Super Bowl ring, who even in his down years with not great teams is going into Week 17 with a chance to get in the playoffs, he's not coaching out. I mean, if you have him coach out a lame duck year, he's going to leave after that. You know what I mean? Because somebody's going to give him $58 million or whatever. So it's the same binary choice Steve Bisciotti had at the bye week. And during the bye week, he wasn't making calls to Harbaugh. He wasn't sniffing around the situation. He wasn't saying, "Hey, I know we're 4-5, and this is the end for Flacco, but I do want to put a ring back on your finger." None of that was happening. Now, if 3 wins has changed all that, if it turns out to be 4 wins, if 9-7 and a first-round loss makes him now recommit to John Harbaugh for 5 years, $50 million, and let's also talk about how personnel is done here, then that's a conversation worth having, and that's a decision that Bisciotti was always going to have to make. But that's sort of still where we are, and the wins have changed, but the end game really hasn't. And as I reported at that time, if Bisciotti's willing to do that, then John Harbaugh is going to listen. But John Harbaugh is not naive. He's not a waif. And he's got to know what's out there on the other side of that building, including some situations where you would say the roster's already better than Baltimore's. And, there's a lot of things that would make you say, well, that's probably better than this.
Jason La Canfora joins us this morning on the show. Just about 35 seconds left. But do you think Josh McDaniels significantly hurt himself in the open market this year by what happened last year?
Nope. I think timing is everything, and we're going to have 8-9 openings, and you give me, once we get past Harbaugh and Rivera and McCarthy, you give me the sure things. You tell me the hot coordinator, but don't tell me Jim Schwartz, don't tell me John DiFilippo. Like, don't tell me Eric Bieniemy's got a better shot at getting a job than Josh McDaniels. Like, those guys might get jobs too, and Chuck Pagano might get a job, and Jack Del Rio might get a job. Because, again, supply and demand, Econ 101, it doesn't match up this year. But there is no doubt in my mind that Josh McDaniels will have the same opportunities he had last year. Does he take them? Do the teams that want him, are they the same teams that he wants? I don't know all that. I don't know how any of that's going to play out. But there will be multiple teams who want to talk to him as soon as they can during that Patriots bye week.
Look, this is a really intriguing time of year for football fans, so be following JLC on Twitter and be reading everything he does at CBSSports.com because he's all over the coaching searches. At Jason La Canfora, also, of course, at CBSSports.com. He's also the host of the Be More Opinionated podcast, all about Baltimore sports, which is very cool as well. JLC, it's always wonderful to catch up, buddy. Thanks so much, man.
Hey, my pleasure, buddy. We'll do it again.
All right,
Thanks,
sounds good. JLC joining us this morning on the show.